Hey, what's up guys, Gypsy, and I'm back here today going to be going over my thoughts on the different rosters for the Draft Premier League. For those of you guys who may not have heard of this yet, this is it's essentially the equivalent of SPL for the draft community. So it's a really cool idea that King L5 and Dougal came up with, and this is actually something that I was chatting to Maddie and Ricardo with about, I want to say like a year and a half ago. We were talking about like how it'd be really interesting to have a draft portion in SPL, like an actual draft tier within the Smogon Premier League, but logistically it probably wouldn't work out because it would just be a bit messy with teams actually having to draft. But you never know, if this kind of thing succeeds, it could actually, one day be implemented into SPL. It's probably pretty unlikely, but you never know. Weirder things have happened. It would be really cool to see that happen, obviously, but this is sort of like, I guess, yeah, the draft community's sort of shot at SPL. It's their equivalent, and the way it works is you've got two captains, a captain and a co-captain per team, and they each take turns with a bunch of other teams and their captains bidding a certain amount of points, a budget in this case of I think it was 120,000 points, bidding that on a set amount of players, like a pool of players. They bid their budget, different portions of their budget, and then eventually they end up with a team. It's an auction system, so everyone has a chance to obtain any player that's put up for nomination, and yeah, it's a really cool kind of take on the format, and something that should be pretty fun. I think it should be a lot of fun. So I'm going to go over each of the rosters and just give you guys my kind of thoughts on the teams. There are definitely some interesting teams here, so yeah, I figured it'd be pretty fun to just go into a little bit of depth. I don't know every single person playing. There are some names that I haven't heard of before, so forgive me if I haven't heard of you and you're watching this. I just may not have heard of you. There's a lot of people who play draft and a lot of leagues out there that I'm not completely familiar with, but a lot of the bigger names I am pretty familiar with. So yeah, we're going to jump into the first team here. We have the Crusaders. So for each team as well, the captains do play, so they alternate. I believe they alternate each week, or they, one has to play at a time. I think the other captain doesn't even necessarily have to play, but at least one captain plays per week. So we're going to jump to the Crusaders now. You see their first pick, Ricardo, my boy Rick. We were hoping to be drafted on the same team, hoping for Rick to kind of fly under the radar a bit and go for something cheap. But unfortunately, this man made his knowledge of the metagame known by running his mouth in the chat. Man picked up some fans and went for 33k. So for some reference, like, the budgets of these teams is 120,000, and it's in SPL it's very unlikely for players to go for 30k. 30k is like very, very good for a player. That is a lot of money to spend on a player. You often see like top tier, for instance in SPL, you see top tier OU players or top tier like old gen players go for that amount, but it's very rare. A lot of teams will kind of cap out their budget at like 25 on a player, 25k, 28k, but like the Brofist, the Blunders, the BKCs of the given format or tier go for that price. And to see Rick, a guy who doesn't play draft format, go for that high is crazy. Rick is an incredibly good player, and he definitely deserves to go for high, even though he doesn't even play the draft format. But for Rick to go for 33k, he couldn't believe it. We were cracking up. But it's no surprise why he went for a high price. A lot of people were keen on Rick. I know the guys I ended up getting drafted to were keen on getting Rick too. The guy can play, and he has played draft in the past. He doesn't main draft. He's an OU player by nature, but he can definitely play. He can adapt and play the draft metagame pretty easily, in my opinion. So I think he's going to be a really good asset to the team. Not only that, but he's a really good builder in certainly in ORAS as well as Sun and Moon. So he's going to really provide a lot of support to their team. And they did spend quite a lot of money on Rick, so that's like almost a third of it's about a quarter of their budget spent on one player. So that's a lot of money. Like, on one hand, it's good to see my boy go for a lot, but you can actually make the argument that going for a lot is a bad thing, because you want to get the best teammates possible, and that is going to require spending a lot of. Right, so the next guy they grabbed was TC for 25.5k. Pretty expensive for TC, in my opinion. I think TC is definitely a good player, and he's a guy I used to play with back in the CFA a long time ago, back in like Gen 6. And I know he plays in Hive and stuff, but that is a lot of money to go for. I think I don't know necessarily like how much they actually, how high they intended to go with him, but they did grab him for quite a high price. I think a few other teams were betting on him, which really forced the price up. Keep in mind, like, this is the first time like a DPL like this, like a Draft Premier League, has happened, so naturally prices are going to be more inflated than they should be. People are going to spend more, especially in the early, like in the first half of the draft. People are going to be blowing way more money than they should, because everyone's getting accustomed to this as a brand new experience. So I'd say in future Draft Premier Leagues, you're going to see people go for a more conservative amount. But even so, like, whilst that is a lot of money, I think he'll be pretty solid. Like, he's one of those players who's quite wild, from what I remember and what I've seen. He's a pretty interesting builder, and he can definitely like take some more, I guess, experienced players off guard with kind of like whack sets and interesting prep. So he could actually end up being a really solid member of that team, especially if he has building support from L5 and is able to just, use his interesting playstyle to his advantage. Then they've got King Sky. I don't know too much about Sky, but I think he's pretty solid from what I hear. 10k sounds like a pretty good price to go for him. I know that L5 and Dougal wanted a bunch of different dudes, like a bunch of their friends on the same team, and I think Sky was one of them. So 10k seems pretty good to secure a friend. Money Guy is good. I know Money Guy's good. I've seen him do well in tours and leagues, I'm pretty sure. 14k I think is a really fair price. Honestly, I think Money Guy could have gone for higher than that. I think he could have comfortably gone for about 17k, honestly, especially given how some of these other people were priced. I think Money could have honestly gone for higher than TC, in my opinion. But definitely a solid player. I think that was a very good buy there, in my opinion. Then Manly Soap, again, another underpriced player. I think Soap's pretty good from what I've seen. 8k probably could have gone in for 10k, honestly. But by this point in the draft, like, a lot of people were running out of money and saving their money for, I think, some of the bigger names that were yet to go. So definitely a good cheap pick. Blue, don't know much about him. I know that he's got a very bad record versus L5. I think he's another one of those kind of buddies of those two. So I haven't really seen him play, couldn't tell you. But I think, like, Perfect Blue, I've heard the name, reasonably solid. Again, should have building help from L5, and yeah, should be able to do at least something for them, I think. Tails, I think Tails was like one of the people helping to run the auction. Don't know much about Tails, honestly, so couldn't tell you. But to go for 10.5k, that's still a pretty respectable price. The last two picks went for 5k each. At this point, no one could really like outbid them, because very few teams had money at this stage in the draft. Like, there were a few teams, but most people were blowing their budget by this point. So Jack and Tristan, I don't know much about these players. I can't say I've heard of them, but they must be somewhat decent to be picked up by this team. So Crusaders, pretty strong lineup if you consider their captains. I've played Dougal before. He's a strong player, and I know L5 is a pretty strong player as well. Just based on tour performances, I've seen him do pretty well in quite a lot of tours. So I know he's quite a confident builder and player. So I think they've got pretty good support with some good middle picks in Money Guy and obviously like Soap, and then I've got King Rick. So I know my man's going to be captaining that team. It should be pretty fun to play them. Pretty strong team overall. A few guys that like I'm kind of unsure about, like Tails and Blue. I don't really know how they're going to perform, but they could end up doing well. So The next team is the team that I ended up getting drafted on. It's the Young Goaters, and this is captained by John W. and Random. John, very strong player. He's been on the up for quite a while now. He's pretty well regarded as a very strong player in the community. And Random, a guy I'm pretty new to, but my man Random apparently captained a second round Mega Blastoise team to an undefeated season, so you gotta have respect for that. And yeah, very, very solid there. But this is a pretty interesting team. I went first in this auction thing. Going for 45k I think is an overpay for sure. I think anyone would say that. But like I mentioned earlier, it's a thing where people don't really know the cap on what the top players should go for. Like 45k is an overspend on anyone, regardless of how good people think they are. But you know, it's the first time this auction's happening. I'd say like I said earlier, in future draft Premier Leagues, you're gonna see the more in-demand players go for like 35k, maybe as more of a cap, I'd say. But anyway, there are a few teams that wanted me, so that did drive the price up. But yeah, they grabbed me first, and the next person they picked up is Rice Pool for 23k, which I think is definitely respectable considering some of the prices that a lot of these other players went for. 23k for Johnny is really solid. He is a good player, and he's a good builder as well. And I think that he's gonna be really good for our team. He definitely knows what he's doing, and he's passionate as well. So that's another huge factor. Deimos, fellow Aussie, going for 11k. Pretty good deal in my opinion. Deimos is solid. Big Daddy Dave, 10k. That's the Hiker Slayer. So that is a nice cheap bargain because Hiker's a great player. V-Nooms, this dude VM Nooms, however you say, very good, very good kind of recent player. 10k to go for again, pretty good. I think we got a few like really good mid-tier picks for like 10k around that point, which is pretty low considering some of these other prices that players have been made. And then we have Vesuvius for 15k. I think John and Random didn't think Vest would go for that high, but a few other teams wanted him, so that did drive the price up there. Definitely a solid player though, and we get Carson, my boy Golden Centurion, to round it up for 5.5k, which is an absolute steal. This dude is a gun, and yeah, it's good to have him on the team. He's my boy. So then the next team is Hiker's team, Hiker and Zern. Hiker, obviously a very strong player himself. I got a lot of respect for Hiker. I think he's definitely up there. And don't know much about Zern, haven't really heard of the guy, but he's co-captaining with Hiker. And their first pick is Jake, which I think is a nice round one pick. Jake's a very strong player. He won like Mega B recently. And to go for 39.5k, I think is a fair price given the high amounts that people are going for. I think a lot of people were after Jake, especially when the first few players were drafted. Jake was going to be naturally the next person to go, so 39.5k, pretty fair. Again, very inflated for, you know, even for a top player. I think it's a lot of money to spend, but I think he's going to serve them well, especially if he takes it seriously. Then Jeremy, 15k. I don't know the dude. I played a Jeremy recently in a draft, and he was pretty average. I don't know if it's the same person, but could be. 15k, a lot to spend though on someone, so hopefully he puts in work for them. ABP, again, I think this is a Hive dude. 8.5k seems kind of cheap. I've definitely heard the name. I don't know how good he is though, so I can't really attest to how much of a bargain that is. Moxie for 20k. This dude is good. I've seen him do really well in tours. I think he won a draft tour kind of recently. I think 20k is a respectable price for him. Considering I know a lot of teams were looking at him, we were looking at him on our squad, so he was pretty in demand. But by that stage in the draft, like going above 20, going to like 21, 22k on a player when you still have so many more slots on the team after you spent like already like 60, 70k of your budget is asking a lot. So I think Moxie is going to be a good addition to their team. Vino, don't think I know Vino. Haven't really heard the name, but he went for 8.5k. Commonly and Jay Carson, two lesser known players, I think. I know we were looking at Jay Carson but he went before we could afford him. We'd run out of points at that point. We'd run out of money, but apparently he's a sleeper threat. I think they got a pretty solid team. Jake, Moxie stand out with Hiker as the kind of standout captain on their squad. I think this is going to be a pretty strong team, honestly. I see these guys going pretty far in it. It'll depend, in my opinion, because they have to win. It doesn't matter like if you've got a couple of stand-up players, you have to like win the majority of games to win the week or to like win the series versus the opposing team. So it's really going to come down to how these cheaper picks can step up and support what will more than likely be wins from guys like Jake and Hiker. So next team, the Platoon Goons, coached captained by Youngster Bill and Low Main. Youngster Bill pretty solid. Like I've seen this guy do well. Low Man, I don't really know. I've definitely seen the name, but I can't really attest to his skill as a player. Either way, these guys drafted a pretty interesting team, honestly. First pick, Bredabus, 10k. Bredabus is solid from what I hear. Like I've played him before. I think I played him in Little Cup or something like that. He's alright. He went for 10k, which is pretty cheap when you look at the rest of the round 1 picks. And I guess that kind of signifies that not a lot of other teams were looking at him, but you know, he could surprise everyone and actually put on a beast of an effort. So we'll have to see there. Count Riario, I think, is their sort of standout early pick. This guy's good. He has a pretty good grasp on draft. I think he plays in like either LD or Hive, one of the two. And he's a solid Smogon player. He plays a lot of lower tiers there, so I think he's going to be solid support for their team, being able to bring a lot of creative team building to the team, and probably a lot of building himself in just in general solid building as well as like creative. Lejon for 29.5. Lejon's a good player. He's a former like Mega B champion, I think, or B champion, one of the two. Definitely a good player. A lot of passion. Definitely a character, and I think he's gonna have to really like step up for this team to do well. AM22, can't say I know the dude. He went for 13k, which isn't too like it's respectable. I think a few guys were looking at this guy, so that drove the price up. Thick Bunny went for 15k. I know a few guys were looking at him. I think he's done pretty well in CPC from what I hear recently, so definitely a threat in my opinion. Someone that can definitely do well with good support. Cat, don't know Cat. not too sure about Cat. Cat went for 6k. Flips, Pineapple and Wombo, I don't know any of these dudes, but they went for a pretty low price, which is good for the rest of the team, because if these guys can do well, if like Cat, Flips, Pineapple and Wombo can get wins, that's going to really support their better players like Lejon and Riario, and Thick Bunny like doing well. Youngster Bill, I think, as well, will be solid as a captain. I know he's competent. So the next team we have is DPL's worst team, captained by Genius and Mayo. Two solid players. Genius definitely and Mayo, both definitely some solid players. I've seen these guys both achieve good success in tours and leagues, so I think these guys will do well. They've got a pretty solid team in my opinion. Ultra player for 18k, fair price for Ultra. I think he's a pretty good player. Not like a standout like some of these other like Jake or you know, Lejon or Riario, but definitely like a good player. For 18k, I think he's fair considering some of the inflated prices of the other players that have been drafted. Jacko, probably their standout, like their best player in my opinion, out of their drafted roster. I think Jacko is quite solid, and if he's around to play Mons, I think he'll do well. 32k, respectable price. I know a lot of people were interested in him, so I think those guys picking him up, he'll work well with their captains in my opinion. Stibe, I don't know the guy, but he went for almost 15k, which is a good price. I think a few guys were looking at him. Eshan, again, never heard of him. Went for 6.5k, which is pretty cheap. So if he can do well, he'll be a good budget pick for them. Will the Most, I've heard this name somewhere. Went for 13k, so obviously a bit of demand on him. Draft 15. I've heard this guy's like pretty good. I don't know like how good he is, but I've heard that he's solid. So to go for 12.5k could be a nice steal. Winston. I don't know. I can't tell if this guy, if people are memeing when they like worship him or not, but he went for 7.5k. Could turn out to be like a really good player. Who knows? Jarrett 10.5k. Don't know Jarrett, and I don't know TJB, but they picked as many players as they could, so it's a pretty diverse roster. Standout players in Jacko, an ultra player, potentially Dra if he's as good as people say he is. I think they've got a pretty solid team. They've got two good captains who can play well. Genius is probably their best player in my opinion. I know Jacko's really good as well. Like Jacko's a former Mega B winner, I think. So yeah, definitely they've got some talent. Mayo's an Aussie, so instant obviously respect there. Pretty solid team. I think probably these guys are in like the top half of the drafts in my opinion. Then we have the Mahomies TTM team, so Jolt and Sticks, the two guys that I like a lot. Two very strong captains. Like this captain duo is powerful. These guys both play draft at a very high level, and I think whilst I don't necessarily think their team is the best, I think like these two guys playing and supporting their team in building, like Jolt as a builder is really solid. Like Jolt with build support for these guys is like his experience is really going to come through. Sticks, very solid player. Still like he's not really new to draft anymore. He's been playing it a while, but compared to Jolt, he's just a baby in the format. But he's a very good player, and he's made a real statement for himself. So their first pick was Leo, 6 foot hacks for 30k. I think it's a respectable price for Leo. I think, yeah, I think if TC goes for 25, Leo definitely deserves to go for 30. Solid player, and Leo's starting to get more involved in tournaments, which is cool. I think that's really going to hone his skills, take him to that next level. So hopefully see Leo do well in this tour. That would be definitely good for these guys. And with build support for Jolt, I really think he can do well because he's got the instincts. Just having that like experience backing him could really propel him to that next stage. Then they pick up my boy Moran, who for 29.5k, I was glad to see people put respect on this man's name because Moran is good. I like watching him play, and I think he's going to do well on this tour. He tends to do really well in tours. He tends to take down some big names, so I'm keen to see him do well. I think he's a very good pick, and I'm not surprised that Jolt and Sticks were looking at him. I didn't say anything to them about him, but I'm glad that I'm not the only one who recognizes this dude's talent. A lot of guys were like, who the fuck is Moran? Like, why is this dude going for like 25k? Why is he almost going for 30k as much as Leo? But this guy's good. Like, he's got good instincts, so it's going to be fun to see him play. Next, they got Specs King for 9k. Don't really know Specs King. I know Jolt is pretty high on him, but I think he's done like decently in. I think he did well in like the Surge tour that they held, but I can't say I've heard his name too much. He went for 9k though. I think he's definitely like a solid player from what I hear. So hopefully he's like a 9k budget steal for them. Halu went for 11k. I know Halu's a pretty old player. He's pretty known. I can't say I've ever seen a strong performance of him. I saw him 6-0 Jake with some like wax set recently, but to go for 11k I think is solid. I think with TTM support, I think Halu is definitely going to be a threat from what I hear anyway. Yorkin to go for 10k, don't know him. I think he's one of the guys who did tryouts with the Mahomies, so I guess they saw something in him. And to go for 10k, I think is solid. He should be able to put in work for them. Legits, Love Chance and Vergy1. Don't know these guys. Again, I think these were just people from their tryouts. But they were obviously willing to spend money on them, so it'll be interesting. These guys have, like, they've got a couple of guys who I think are going to do really well, and a few unknowns who might actually end up depending a lot on build support from the rest of the team. This team's success, in my opinion, is going to really come down to how these cheap dudes play, because these like less expensive picks, how they stack up. Because I think dudes like Moran and the respective captains will always get wins. I think Leo will do well. Specs King will probably do well. It'll really come down to how these last like four or so picks do. That, in my opinion, is what is going to determine the success of this team. Pretty interesting squad though. And then we're going to slide across and look at the last couple of teams. So next up we have Large Wings, captained by Ice Demon Grey and Shiny Sableye. I don't actually know these guys. Like, I've heard their names, but I've not seen them play, so I can't like. They're not too like names that you look at and just identify with being big players, but I think they're pretty solid from what I hear. Their first pick was Baby Eric for 23.5k. This is, in my opinion, like a bit of an overspend. I don't think Eric's worth 23.5k. I think he's like a solid player, but that's a lot of money on someone who isn't that proven in draft. But he could end up doing well. I think that'll depend on. I think he needs to do well, because the rest of their roster is like, it's not the strongest. But in saying that, they do have Sablo for 31k. I think Sablo is their best player, hands down. A very, very solid player. To go for 31k, I think is respectable. A lot of people were high on Sablo. A lot of people wanted to pick him up. I know we were looking at him as well. So to go for 31k is respectable. David for 20k. David's not bad. I don't really know how he does in tours though. I've never really seen him do well in tours, but to go for 20k, if he takes it seriously, this man is the master of taking making meme picks when he drafts and picking like 6 like water types and like mono fairy and shit. So I don't know. I think like in this kind of format though, if he tries, he'll do well because he's got a good grasp on the game. Excellent name, another Aussie dude. This guy's good. I think he's another one of those players that's coming more and more into recognition through his tour performances. 14k is good for him. I know that a few other teams, I know Jolt was looking at him. I suggested we look at him too. 14k for him, I think is respectable. He's a solid player, and he's definitely getting better and better. So then they have Shiny Spam here. I don't know who Shiny Spam is. 6.5k. Bronson, pretty known player. He's solid actually. Like I've seen him play against guys like Aki before, and do well. So yeah, solid player. Went for 8.5k. Could be a workhorse for their team potentially if he really tries. Inversify, Shiny Weavile. I think Shiny Weavile is a sub of mine actually. So shouts out to Shiny Weavile. I know this dude. He's a good guy. Inversify. I recognize the name too. Can't tell you where, but I recognize the name. But these guys all went for 5.5k. LKR Moose, I don't know who that dude is, but he went for 5k. So the last few picks went for cheap. I think they've got it. Like if Baby Eric and David play well, which they can, if they get build support from dudes like Sablo, an excellent name. I think this team can do well because I feel like Sablo is going to win more than likely, more than he loses anyway. Ian is a solid player. He's got a good grasp on the game. It's going to come down to how these cheaper dudes perform. Half the team is going to play Sun and Moon, half the team is going to play ORAS. So it's really going to come down to their knowledge. I don't think a lot of these guys have been in the game for that long, so you might find that some of them struggle in ORAS a bit because it's a very different meta game to Sun and Moon. So we'll have to see. But yeah, pretty interesting team. Not one of the stronger teams in my opinion, despite having Sablo, but could be like a dark horse if their lower tier picks, their kind of cheaper picks, pick up the slack. Then the last team is Start Draft Now, Shuckle King and Omega Jolteon, 2 solid captains. Yep, these guys are good, pretty solid. Not like standout players, but players who definitely know what they're doing. They pick up Techno for 45k in the first slot. Techno, very solid player. Also went for 45k, which is a lot of money. Again, a lot of money to spend on one player. But Techno, everyone knew Techno would go for a high amount. And yeah, if Techno's in it, I think if he's around to play and he's around to like build with everyone, I think he'll do well. and that's probably their strongest player, honestly. Like, Techno is without a doubt their strongest player. Saint, I think, is a pretty decent player. Ace of Games is good. This guy is like, he's a bit hot and cold, but when he's hot, he's hot. Blitz 17k, very consistent player from what I hear. I've seen him do pretty well in some leagues and tours, so Blitz I think is a good price. For 17k is pretty good for him. I know a lot of people were keen on these two, like Ace of Games and Blitz. A few different teams were looking at them, so for these guys to get that nice, like, reliable kind of mid-price, mid-tier support for Techno is good in my opinion. Troy for 8k, BM for 10k, BM another Aussie to go for 10k, pretty cheap because Aussies usually go for more in my opinion. So BM for 10k is a steal. Crypto 5k and Junior Sniper 5k. Don't really know too much about these guys, but they both went for the cheapest they could. So these guys had quite a bit of money by the end, so they were able to fill out their roster almost completely. Pretty strong team. I think Techno, obviously their standout player. Strong players in Omega Jolteon and Shuckle King. I think these guys will try hard. And they've got some good mid-tier support from Ace and Blitz, in my opinion, to support that. A lot of these teams, it's really going to come down to how their cheaper players perform, because you need to win the majority of games to win a week, and you know, you can't rely just purely on your like one or two really good players to win it all for you, because that's just not how it works. So pretty interesting rosters. I'm not going to rank them like top to bottom or bottom to top. I've kind of like just given my thoughts on them. I think there are some that stand out purely like because of the captains. I think the Mahomes is strong. They've got a really strong captain lineup. Strong first few picks. Questionable like lower picks, but just because no one really knows much about these players. But if they get support from Jolt, they'll do well. Genius Mayo team, pretty strong. I think these guys are again in the top half. Jacko, Ultra player, potentially Dra. Hiker's team, pretty good. I like Hiker's team. I think Hiker, Jake, and Moxie will be their sort of strong core there. And then, you know, obviously my squad here. L5's team I think will do well too. Those four teams that I mentioned, in my opinion, will be the ones that more than likely excel in this tour. But we'll have to see. I could be completely wrong, and the rest of the teams could wash the competition. We'll have to see. But yeah, just a bit of a different video for you guys. Hope you did enjoy my kind of rundown on the teams. Let me know what you guys think, obviously, if you disagree with my take on these teams, and if you want to just voice your opinions on how you guys think the different rosters will go. Let me know in the comments. And yeah, drop a like if you enjoyed, and I'll catch you guys next time.